Hello, everyone, and welcome to NAACP Connect right here on Google Plus, as well as naacpconnect.org. I'm Larry Brown Jr., your host for today's conversation, 60 years after Brown versus the Board of Education. If you did not know, the NAACP just wrapped up our annual Daisy Bates Education Summit celebrating 60 years after the Brown versus Board of Education victory. And today we'd like to continue the conversation with two wonderful individuals who have joined us today. We'll first begin with one of my colleagues and friend, Kela, attorney Kela Crane, who is the Assistant General Counsel for the NAACP. Kela, good afternoon. How are you today?
Good afternoon, Larry. How are you?
I am great. I am great. I'm looking forward to this conversation with you for such a groundbreaking case for civil rights that broke education barriers across the board. Let's start, Kela, by talking about Brown versus the Board of Education. Just kind of give us a top-level summary for young people who might be watching today that may have heard a little bit about Brown versus Board and what the case was about and the trial and where we are today.
Sure. Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas is a combination of five cases actually from across the country, which was started here with the NAACP with 4 out of the 5 cases with our attorneys from our office. So Charles Hamilton Houston, which is unfortunately an unknown civil rights attorney. He used to be the dean of Howard Law School. He was our first general counsel here at the NAACP. He was working with his mentor, or his mentee rather, Thurgood Marshall. He put together a collection of cases from South Carolina, from the Commonwealth of Virginia, from Delaware, and also from Topeka, Kansas. And this case was really to challenge whether or not separate schools divided by race are actually equal. So there were studies conducted throughout the course of the 40s and the 50s about how young people's perceptions of themselves had been shaped based upon them being in separate schools. And so ultimately, throughout these several cases, we made our way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court unanimously on May 17th, 1954, stated that the doctrine of separate but equal is unconstitutional. In fact, the author of that Supreme Court case said that separate but equal is inherently unequal. And so from that case, the court stated that with all deliberate speed, they had to, schools across the country had to desegregate. Now, unfortunately, some of our states were very resistant to this, and there was an additional case called Brown 2, which talked about how states needed to go about desegregating. And it really took some states until the 1970s to actually desegregate their schools across the South.
That's amazing. It's not necessarily amazing in a good way, but amazing that it took that long to desegregate schools across the South. I mean, imagine what it would be like in 2014 if that was going on. You know, it would be completely terrible. If you guys are just joining us, this is the NAACP Connect conversation, Brown versus the Board of Education, 60 years later. Kela, let's talk about a little bit of your background as it relates to the NAACP. We mentioned Charles Hamilton Houston as being a leader in this case. You are the immediate past Charles Hamilton Houston Law Fellow for the National Association. Tell us about that position and what that means to the association, as well as what it meant to you.
Yeah, it's a high honor to be the first Charles Hamilton Houston Legal Fellow here at the National Office. So that position meant that I was the first legal fellow after graduating from law school to work here in the Office of the General Counsel. And so I worked with our General Counsel, Kim Keenan, and the rest of the legal staff and support staff here in the National Office doing some great work that we do all across the country. And then it's also giving me a chance to be fresh out of law school, really hone my skills as both a civil rights attorney, but also as a corporate attorney, because that is the role that we have here at the National Association in our legal offices, that we're both corporate attorneys, basically meaning attorneys for the organization itself, but also doing the civil rights work that the NAACP is known for. And named after Charles Hamilton Houston, like I said before, who was the first general counsel of the NAACP, the architect for Brown versus Board of Education, and so many other great civil rights cases. He was the dean of the law school, which I attended, Howard University School of Law, which our main building is named after Dean Houston. And so it almost is like Dean Houston is following me throughout my legal career, the beginning of my legal career. And in fact, if you would ever come to the national office, when we arrive on our floor, there's a picture of Dean Houston and a quote by Dean Houston that says, a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. And that's something, it's a charge that all of us here at the national office, and particularly our legal office, takes with us every single day, that we want to be those social engineers that break down the walls of injustices using our tools as lawyers and staff members here in the legal office to further the cause of civil rights. Because we understand that though many people believe that the civil rights movement ended in the late 60s or early 70s, it really did not. We continue doing that groundbreaking civil rights work every single day here in the national office.
That's wonderful, Kela. I love the quote. I love everything that you just said. And I love the fact that Dean Houston talked about being a social engineer. Brown versus Board was a huge win for the NAACP and education and civil rights at large. Talk to the specifics of how this legal win really is significant, not just to show people that you've got to fight for what you want, but how law plays a role in making decisions for civil rights in America and at large.
Right. So a lot of the injustices that we're fighting here at the NAACP and that we have fought in our 105 years as a national association have been to redo how the law operates and works, not only for African Americans, but for people all across the country. And we know that even with the founding of the United States, there have been laws or discrimination enshrined in laws. We know about the 3/5 compromise that was enshrined in our national constitution. We know about laws that enshrined that black people could only sit in a part of a bus, or black people had to enter into the back of different stores or food places and that sort of thing. So we use the law to counteract those. We use the law to expand rights for folks. So the Brown versus Board of Education was just one step in showing that we all have a right to sit at the table. We all have the right to be able to be equal in this thing we call America. And so we continue to use the law to further the playing field, further the table that all of us can sit at in America. So, you know, even in 2014, we're using the law to break down the barriers for gay and lesbian Americans, for them to be able to get married. And so we're using, because that has been enshrined in law, that same-sex couples cannot marry. And so we're using the law to break that and making sure that everyone has the right to sit at that table who wants to get married, and so that we do have equal opportunity under the law, which is what the NAACP has fought for its entirety of 105 years. And so we see it in many different areas, even with voting. We understand that the Constitution had to be amended 4 or 5 times so that everyone would have the right to participate in the franchise. So we know with the 15th Amendment, we worked to get the law in this way changed in the Constitution so that black men could have the right to vote, or that people would not be disenfranchised based on their race, which is what the 15th Amendment said, and that only really pertained to black men. Then the 19th Amendment, the law was changed in the form of the Constitution to allow women to be able to vote. And we see that continuously within the amendments in the Constitution. So we use the law to ensure that that the law does not discriminate against certain folks, and that the law is able to allow people to really be a part of the America that we know it can be.
I completely agree with you 100%. And as we look to continue to fight for the America that we want to live in and the America that we want our future to enjoy as well as build upon the work that we've done. Kela, you and I share something in common, and we kind of discovered this the other day when we were
Right.
talking in the office. But we were talking on this on the heels of a major Supreme Court decision that came down involving affirmative action. You and I both were involved as youth in the state of Michigan in the Gratz versus Bollinger case. Can you talk a little about? I can talk about it, but since you're the lawyer, I'm on this side. You're the lawyer now.
Feel free to talk about it.
Tell the folks about the case, what happened, and then I've got one follow-up question for you after you kind of talk about the case.
Sure. So, yeah, and that's so crazy that Larry and I figured this out, 16 years later.
It was so random. We were in a conversation. So here's the backstory for how we figured it out, everybody. We were in a conversation in the office and talking about the news about the decision from the Supreme Court, and we Googled the actual documents filed for the Supreme Court, and lo and behold, my name was listed, and then like 3 rows down was Kela's name, and we were like, wait a second, that's you, that's me, and here we are as colleagues at the NAACP 16 years later. So take it away, Kela.
Yeah, so when we were about 15 or 16 years old, I was approached, and I think the same thing with Larry, we're approached to be interveners in this case called Gratz versus Bollinger. Bollinger was the then president of the University of Michigan, and Ms. Gratz was challenging the fact that there were certain points that were awarded to folks who were applying to attend the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and one of those points were awarded for folks who were of underrepresented minorities, so Black, Latino, that sort of thing. And so we were representing those youth who had all of the other credentials, but we also happened to be either African American or Latino, in explaining why there was a need to award, certain points for this, and that we would be able to get into the university without them, but how it, enhanced and helped to create a more diverse University of Michigan, which is the point of that case, was really to allow or provide a mechanism for underrepresented minorities access to the University of Michigan. So we participated on the district level, and which is in the federal system of courts. And so we participated on the lower level, and it actually reached all the way to the Supreme Court. And you may have also heard of the Grutter case. That was an accompanying case from the law school side at the University of Michigan. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court did not find in favor of the case that Larry and I were a part of on the undergraduate side. They believed that it amounted to quotas, which the Supreme Court has said in the 1970s were unconstitutional. However, the Supreme Court said in Grutter that it was allowed for what the law school was trying to do, and the mechanism that they made to increase diversity at the law school, what they did was okay. And so on one hand, we lost, but on the other hand, we won. And that Grutter case has been used several times in the last 10, 11 years to ensure diversity in higher education. Most recently with the Fisher case, Fisher versus the University of Texas at Austin, the Supreme Court utilized that when they were looking at how the University of Texas tried to bring diversity into its school. And then it also was looked at just a little bit in the Shuey case from Michigan as well. That was just decided by the Supreme Court a couple of months ago. So that case, it was so funny that we found out that we were both a part of that as an intervener in that case. But it was very important that the court recognized that diversity in higher education was important, and that it gave us a tool kit, or a template rather, on how we can achieve diversity. Unfortunately, we have seen that since affirmative action has been limited and outlawed in the state of Michigan, the amount of Black and brown young people entering into the University of Michigan has decreased, which is one of the things that we were trying to articulate as interveners in that case so many years ago.
Absolutely, Keela, and I think that it was an honor to even be a part of such a historical and groundbreaking moment in our history. Sadly, it did not go in the direction in which we'd like to have gone, but
Right.
we can say that as youth, we took a stand for something. This is while we were in
Absolutely.
high school, while people were trying to get driver's licenses and picking out prom dresses at some point.
Right.
This is what we were doing while we were high school students, and
Right.
I want to give you your Charles Hamilton Houston moment, Keela, and kind of give a charge to young people today and tell them why it's important to raise your voice, even as a youth under 18 years old, and fight for equality and education and for civil rights across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I always want to challenge young people that you have the tools, you have the capability to fight for your rights, and especially when we're talking about education, it directly affects you. You're the ones that are attending elementary, middle, high school, and in the undergraduate sphere as well. So it directly affects you. So you definitely need to raise your voice and talk about, how your curriculum does not do what you need it to do, or that you're not being challenged enough in school. I mean, if you look through the history books, it was young people that were fighting against injustices and segregation all across the country, particularly in the South, but all across the country. When we talk about Daisy Bates was the youth advisor for the Little Rock Nine and the youth advisor for the Little Rock Youth Council. And so our youth council members definitely should be encouraged as they're watching the Daisy Bates Summit today. And if you go back and watch it on the NAACP website, that it was young people that were really pushing this country to be a better America, to change the laws, to fight for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that we will commemorate later on this year, and fight for the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that we'll commemorate next year. It was young people when, I don't want to be too long, but it was young people being beaten in Birmingham and having dogs sicked upon them because they were fighting for those rights that were being denied to them. That is when those in Washington looked down upon Birmingham and said that there's something that we must do. So I don't want young people to think that because they're young, they cannot fight for their rights, and they cannot be a part of this civil rights movement of the 21st century, because you absolutely can in whatever area that inspires you to take action, whether it's voting rights, whether it's education, if it's same-sex marriage or marriage equality, or it's health and environmental, whichever way that inspires you to get involved and change your world, you have the tools and the capability. You don't have to wait until you become an older adult. You can get involved right now. And please use Larry and I as an example of what you can do as a young person to try to change your world. We never really realized how pivotal our case would be when we were 16 years old. We just wanted to lend our voice and get involved, and you can do the same.
Great. Thank you so much, Keela. I think we're having a little microphone difficulty on the background, but that was completely powerful and right on target and right on time. Keela Crane, Assistant General Counsel at the NAACP, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure as always.
Thank you so much. And I want to say hi to Professor Ogletree. You inspire me so much. So hello.
Professor Ogletree's trying to talk back to Keela. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
Professor Ogletree, 1 second. I think your mic is muted. We're going to get someone there to assist you in unmuting your microphone so that you can talk back to Keela here. And as you all can see, we've got the great Charles Ogletree coming to us soon in the conversation once we get his microphone unmuted. While we're working on that, Keela, what are some of the things that you admire about Professor Ogletree as we prepare to bring him into the conversation?
Well, Professor Ogletree has been working on civil rights issues for a long time, and he's unwavered by, some of the highs and lows that civil rights advocacy might bring. He's doing some phenomenal work with the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute at Harvard, which I would love to be able to come and see, because like I said, Dean Houston kind of follows me everywhere I go. And so doing a lot of landmark research about race and justice and how it integrates with the law. It's so inspiring that you can continue to do this work and find innovative ways to do civil rights work and social justice work in the law that's not necessarily in the courtroom, or if you want to be in the courtroom now, but you can change it out later and work at Harvard if you're so able to do so. He's doing all of that and coming back and inspiring our activists on the ground, as he did all day today at the Daisy Bates Educational Summit. So lending his voice, it's just so inspiring to see what things that I can do, just following his great example.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Professor
Yeah.
Ogletree dropped out of the conversation, so he may have missed some of that, but we know that he can go back and watch the archived conversation
Absolutely.
on YouTube, and he can catch everything that you just said. As we're waiting to bring him back up in the video chat, let's look ahead to July. What can we expect from the NAACP as it relates to the legal side of things and educational discussions and discussions with young adults and youth in college? What can we expect to see coming from you and your colleagues during the 105th convention?
Sure. So we're really excited to welcome everyone out to Las Vegas for the convention. And the legal office has multi-roles. So the first couple of days in Las Vegas, we will have our 30th CLE, which is a continuing legal education. And we'll be talking about a couple of things that are really of importance to the Youth and College Division. One is the Stand Your Ground law. So it's going to be 1 year after the unfortunate verdict of George Zimmerman. And we're going to talk about what has been happening around Stand Your Ground laws and how lawyers can use their voice to advocate in repealing or amending these Stand Your Ground laws across the country. We also are going to be talking more about 60 years after Brown. Where are we with desegregation? Do we see schools resegregating themselves? And that we have seen that across the country. So we're talking about how can we continue the momentum of Brown and push it forward. So those are a couple of things that we'll be doing during our CLE. And then we have a new project that the NAACP has recently launched called the Vote Watch Project, where all of our units, no matter if they're adult units or youth in college, can participate in identifying and working with our national legal and voting rights offices to end voter suppression all across the country. So we'll be doing our webinars about the Vote Watch Project, figuring out how to get good evidence about voter suppression tactics that may be happening, how you can lend your voice by attending local committee hearings or local city council and county council meetings when they're talking about election issues, so that you can lend your voice at the NAACP and letting them know that we don't, how we can go against these voter suppression tactics, and then how you can report those tactics that may be happening in your local area to the NAACP national office. So that's a couple things that we'll be doing out there in Vegas, and so I hope to see you all at the 105th annual convention.
Yes, and guess what? I think this is the perfect time, Kela, to say, if you are not a member of the NAACP, what are you waiting on?
Absolutely.
Go to naacp.org/member and join today. We know that this conversation has the potential to reach 100,000 people and more. So we know that all of you aren't members of the association. So here's your chance to take a stand for something great. We've been here for 105 years, and we need you to join us in this fight. So come be a member of the NAACP so that you can stand with us for the sake of social justice advocacy. Kela Crane, again, thank you so much, and I'm glad to say that Charles Ogletree is in the conversation.
All right.
Let's give him a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen watching at home.
I give him a round of applause. He's so great. I wish I just could listen on.
You can. You totally can.
Let me just say, Kela, it's great hearing from you and hearing what you had to say. And I think that the future of the NAACP is getting young people involved in one respect or another. As you probably know, Larry, I joined the NAACP as a youth when I was washing cars back in Merced with a friend of mine, making a little bit of money. We raised $200, and we thought that was a lot of money in the 1960s. And then continued becoming a life member of the NAACP because of what they do. And I have to thank this organization for making it possible for me, a kid from Merced, first one to go to college in my family, to go from Merced to Stanford to Harvard, and now teach at Harvard many years later. So I'm very happy to be a part of this, very happy to be at this convention, very happy to see the NAACP is as committed today as it was decades ago to racial justice. That's very important.
So tell me this, Professor Ogletree, what was it like today participating in the Daisy Bates Summit 60 years after Brown versus Board and knowing all that you contributed to the social justice fabric of this country?
Well, this was an amazing experience for me because as much as you think about getting older and getting away from this, Daisy Bates made all the difference when she was able to talk to children who were in high school to have this big demonstration at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. I knew a lot about it because my mother grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas before coming to California. I knew a lot about it because I had the 1957 students, including Ernie Green, come to Harvard Law School and also had them come to a baseball game when the Boston Red Sox were playing. It was great seeing the history of the past coming to us and seeing what the future would have to hold. And so I see those people, the folks in the Brown situation who went to jail, were beaten, some were killed. I see the people who, like Rosa Parks, who sat down on the bus to make sure that things would happen. In 1955, I saw Emmett Till. I saw the video of Emmett Till going from Chicago to Jackson, Mississippi, and being beaten by white men because of what? Because of whistling at a white woman. And that to me was a big lesson. And so I've been trying as a student in college, as a professor at Harvard, and as a student at Harvard, to now make sure that this generation of children know about what happened before they came to Harvard and what they have to do involved in the community when they leave Harvard as well.
So how can other people in your peer group make sure that the young people do know exactly what happened before their day or today? So many times we hear that the young people don't know their history. They're not ready to receive the greatness that's ahead of them because they don't know the stories ahead. How do you tell people to really enculturate young people into these stories?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Larry. I'm going to have this whole conversation, particularly with Kela Crane, posted on my website at the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice. And the website is www.charleshamiltonhouston.org. Charles Hamilton Houston is one word. And that's going to be posted as soon as I can. And number two, the whole idea by taking his name to create this program at Harvard was designed to celebrate a person that I never met and never knew, but someone who's made an enormous amount of difference from his youth in Washington, D.C., going to the M Street High School in the district, then going to college at Amherst College when it was all men's university, and then after fighting in World War I as an officer because of his success at Amherst, becoming a student at Harvard Law School and the first African American to ever be on the Harvard Law Review. And with all this learning, Larry, he could have gone anywhere in the world and get a job, make a lot of money, and be a success. But you know what he did? He took his training from Harvard Law School and went back to Howard Law School and taught people like Thurgood Marshall and Oliver Hill and other civil rights leaders to talk about this. The whole idea is to be involved in the struggle. And he said back then, something that Thurgood Marshall repeated over and over again when he was alive, he says, a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite. And I remember that like he said it yesterday. And you have to remind students of that every single day. You're either a social engineer, talk about justice and equality for those who follow you, or you're a parasite. You're destructive to your community if you don't do things like this. So that's what I've been trying to do. And I'm not Charles Hamilton Houston. I'm not trying to be Charles Hamilton Houston. But he is a symbol of our success in our community. And if he can make it, I can make it, and those who follow me, a little kid from Merced, California, they can make it as well.
And we appreciate everything that you're contributing to it. I mean, it's wonderful, and we appreciate you for it. You mentioned Kela actually mentioned the same quote from Charles Hamilton Houston as well, because it's on the wall on the 5th floor of the national headquarters for the NAACP. I want to give you the same opportunity that Kela had and really issue a charge. Kela issued a charge to young professionals and young people under the age of 18. I'd like you to issue a charge to people over the age of 18 and let them know, speak to them and let them know why it's important to create these opportunities, especially educational opportunities for young people? You mentioned that Charles Hamilton Houston had the opportunity to go to my alma mater, Howard University, and Kela's alma mater for law school, and teach grades as Thurgood Marshall and so on. Talk about the importance of creating educational opportunities.
It's so important, and I want to say to young people and people who are seasoned and older that how important it is to think about education. It was what people fought and died for in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s. We are where we are today because somebody stood up for us decades ago, and we should be grateful to that and continue that legacy. The second thing, we have to let people know that they may think that they got there because they are all of that. They may think they got there because they are people who have been bright and successful. But they only got there because somebody like Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston and Constance Baker Motley opened these doors. And I think that's what we have to make important. When I first went to Harvard, I was teaching a lot of classes that had very little to do with the struggle. They were about ethics, they were about criminal law, that was important. But now I'm teaching classes about revitalizing America's cities. So I get a chance to talk about Charles Hamilton Houston. I get a chance to talk about Daisy Bates. I get a chance to talk about Ernie Green. I get a chance to talk about Thurgood Marshall. And I think people need to understand how great these individuals were and what they did for us. And the reality is that it's true. Most of these individuals have died before these young people went to school. But if you think about doing something, you have to stand up now. And you have to carry the torch that was handed to you. And you have to make sure that when you rise to the top, that you leave the door open because someone is coming behind you. So that's my message to them. Keep the door open and make sure that the next generation can do what they did, that is, succeed in a time when it's difficult. And let me just make it clear, it's not an easy time because now young black men are dropping out of high school. And they think wrongly that they can be like me or my grandfather or other people's father or grandfather, get a job anywhere doing anything. Those jobs are taken by others, and they can't do what was done decades ago. They have to get an education, they have to go to school, and they have to make a place for them. In reality, and I'm talking to not just the people who graduated with, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, but people who are graduated thank you lauding. The whole idea is that people who just graduated, but want to make it clear that they're going to be the leaders of the 21st century. And we need to applaud those folks who stick to it. I give scholarships every single year to my high school, and I don't give them to the best students who have succeeded because they're going to get those anyway. I give them to people who have this whole sense of commitment, who have this sense of vitality, who have the sense of I'm not through yet, who have this sense of making a difference in the world, even though they haven't been able to make it so far in their lives. I'm not giving up on anybody. Nobody gave up on me, and nobody should give up on our next generation. So the whole idea is to, in a sense, as you climb, make sure you bring somebody with you, and as you reach the top, leave the door open so other people can be with you as well.
Wonderfully said, Professor Ogletree. I know that you have to run and your time is short, but I'd like to give the last question to Kela Crane to ask you. Kela, go ahead with your question.
All right, thanks, Larry. So, Professor Ogletree, what would you say is the most pressing legal issue that young people would be able to advocate for, even as they're aspiring to become lawyers and not lawyers just yet?
It's very interesting to talk about it, Kela. If you look at the decision you talked about a little bit before, the Michigan decision, it is going in the wrong direction. The whole idea to end affirmative action when it's been something that's been so beneficial. And I want people to understand it's not that we're unqualified. That's not what affirmative action is about. The whole idea is to make sure that you have diversity among qualified people and make sure that that still happens. We're going to lose that. I want them to read the dissent from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, a Latina who grew up in poverty, who understands what it means to work for a life, understands the means to the struggle without having somebody, adults in the house all the time, making that happen for her. And I think that's what we need to do. So that's very important to make sure that we pass it on to the next generation. Read and you can lead. That's the message. Read and you can lead. Reading books. Reading whatever you can it makes all the difference in the world to read, to be a leader. And once you can do that, nobody can stop you. Nobody, ain't no stopping me now. That's a song that they need to hear and listen to. And I believe in the great philosopher, and I think both you guys know him, the late James Brown. Back up.
Oh, yeah.
And he said this way back when: I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open up the door and I'll get it myself. You think about that, what that means. I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open up the door and I'll get it myself. And I know there's a rap artist who is better and different and more up to date on these issues, but the whole idea is that we just want a chance. Give us a chance to get inside, and we promise you we will lift as we climb.
Absolutely. It's a high honor to be able to ask you this question and serve on this panel with you, Professor.
My pleasure, Kela, and I want to be at your inauguration when you become the first African-American woman as President of the United States of America.
It will be my privilege, absolutely.
Don't forget me now, because I'm coming. I will be there.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And I will be there too, Kela. Make sure you keep the door open like Professor Ogletree said earlier in the conversation. Professor Charles Ogletree, Attorney Kela Crane, thank you all both for joining me for this conversation today. Don't let the conversation end here. Continue to make your comments on the event page. Take this event, embed it on your blogs, share it via Twitter, share it via Facebook, and on Google+. We love you today for joining us. Thank you for sharing. And remember, you can always chart your course, share your story, and change the world right here with NAACP Connect. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.